It's been about a month and a half since we finished the LS swap. I've put about 150 miles on the Jeep, and it is running like a top. But there's a couple things that we need to talk about. A couple weeks ago, I posted on Instagram and asked for any and all of your questions that you guys had about the swap. And today, we've got some upgrades to do, but I owe you guys some answers. So let's do this Q&A style while I'm wrenching. Trail Bandit says, is there anything that I would change since doing the LS swap? And yes, there's a couple things. There's one thing that we're changing today. Trust me, this thing rips and I'm loving it. But I'm running into a couple issues. Probably one of the biggest issues that I'm running into is frankly just because I was trying to be cheap. So if you watch the full swap series, you probably remember that I was running the entire power system for my Holley ECU off of this guy. And I told you guys in that video that I wanted to do a full review on that switch panel. Now, to be fair, when these guys made this switch panel, they probably didn't assume that you were going to try and run a whole car on it. So you can kind of take it or leave it. But frankly, I just don't feel super comfortable having the entire system, including ignition, running off of this. Thankfully, the guys over at sPod saw what we were trying to do by actually running a whole car off of a switch panel, and they make a product that's good for that. So we got it. That's right. We picked up the sPod Bantam X with the touchscreen controller, and we're replacing basically all of this wiring under here starting right now. This already looks better than what I had in there before. Now there's like a million sPod install videos out there, so I'm not gonna waste your guys' time on the actual how-to. This thing came out so dang clean. And not only did it clean up underneath the hood, but inside, well, inside is really where the sPod shines because of this touchscreen. Now, as you guys can see, I have the Holley powered to switch number 1. Ignition is actually on a momentary switch on switch number 2, and then the fans on switch number 3. So as long as I have those 3, we are always going to be ready to rock and roll. And yes, I know the continuity on this video is terrible because just one clip ago, the Jeep was a whole different color and I wasn't wearing this sick Garage Built shirt. I'm gonna have these shirts linked down in the description if you wanna get one. This is for all of us guys that are just out here literally doing these builds in our garage instead of paying the big fancy shop to do it for us. There's nothing wrong with paying a great shop to do killer work for you, but I also take a little pride in knocking this thing out right here in the garage. So if you decide you want to snag a shirt, you know where to go, but back to the video. Now the next question that I received is actually a pretty simple one, and we can cover it with a simple yes. Just kidding, let me explain. So yes, all the turn signals still work, the brake lights, the radio. If I had interior lights, they would all still work. All of that is because we kept the original Jeep PCM, and all of that still works on the ignition switch. Now again, remember, we did do the Holley digital dash. Now if you didn't see the episode where we installed the Holley digital dash, you might have missed the part where you actually have to keep the original PCB board from the gauge cluster in order to make sure that all of that stuff still works. But yeah, I mean, we do still have the radio. Actually, we still have the original factory radio with these terrible green letters. Still have working windows. And I do still have heat. So yes, all of that stuff does still work, but it's because we planned for that from the start. Now, because I've had a little more time with the Jeep since I started filming this video, I've actually figured out a couple of things that just aren't actually working as good as I want them to. The first of those things is going to be something that we need to address, and that's going to be the cooling. You see, we use this awesome 4-row Frostbite radiator from Holley, but because I went with such a thick radiator, it actually really limited my options for a fan. Now, I don't know how well you can actually see down here, but we just really don't have a ton of room between the fan and the engine itself. And so, admittedly, I went with a smaller fan, hoping that it would work out. And I learned pretty quickly that that's just not going to be the case. The small fan that we used is just simply not enough CFMs to push air through that radiator. So the fan is something that we're still gonna have to figure out. I'm halfway tempted to just replace this radiator with a standard JK type radiator so that I can then use the stock fans. But I'm not really sold on that idea yet. I think this radiator is plenty good for the cooling that we need. We just need to get some more fan on it. So I'm gonna figure that out, and I will be sure to keep you guys in the loop. Now, the next thing that I figured out that we need to fix is actually pretty much visible to my entire neighborhood. So we've got a pretty gnarly leak coming from the back of the transmission. I'm pretty sure it is just the output shaft seal, but regardless, it means I've got to pull the whole transfer case and T-case adapter back down, and that's been something that I'm just really kind of putting off. But yeah, we definitely need to take care of that. Now, another question that I got almost as much as that is, what about the AC? Does the AC still work? And the answer to that is a little more complicated. Right off the bat, no. I don't have AC in this anymore currently, mainly because of two different reasons. The first reason is I don't have an AC compressor in here, and my AC lines are not hooked up. But also, from my understanding, the Jeep PCM controls the AC, and I'm not exactly sure how I'm gonna get the factory switches to then turn on the compressor once I do install it. Now, that's not the end of the world, because there are a few companies out there that specifically make aftermarket AC systems for engine swaps or cars that don't even have AC from the factory. And worst case scenario, that'll probably be what we end up going with. But I'm definitely going to try and figure it out. Just haven't had time to bother with figuring out AC just yet. Now, this last question is a long one, and I'm going to kind of skip around just a little bit. But just as a reminder, we did go with a 6.0 LQ9 for the engine and a 4L80 for the transmission. What swayed me, LS versus Hemi, is frankly all just personal preference, kind of, and cost on the other part. So the personal preference is I've always wanted a Jeep that had an LS in it. Jeeps come factory now with Hemis, so it's just a little less intriguing to me. The other part of that is an LS swap generally is going to be quite a bit cheaper than a Hemi swap, at least from what I've seen. And of course, the number one question that I've gotten this entire time is, how much did it cost? And honestly, I've been putting off this video for so long because I didn't want to sit down and actually calculate that up. But there's no time better than now, so I have my handy dandy spreadsheet right here on my phone, and let's just go over some cost breakdowns. Now, I'm going to be sure to put everything on the screen so you can actually visualize it, and then there's also going to be a link down below with a full spreadsheet and links to every product that I used. But nevertheless, let's get into it. Engine and transmission were $4,800. That was complete rebuild on the top end of the engine with the cam, and transmission was stopped, so that's why I have a leak. Then we had the Holley Terminator at right under $1,600. T-case adapter for $554. My drive shafts were modified. It was about $300 at the local shop. Motor mounts were about $440. Unfortunately, I don't know that Bruiser is still selling those. At least I've been told by a bunch of you guys. The link in my original video doesn't work anymore. That wasn't a sponsored post. I don't know if they still have them. Give them a call. We did end up adding a transmission cooler. That was about 200 bucks. Transmission cooler hoses and random hoses along the way. Another couple $100 there. The radiator itself is about $540. The alternator from JS Alternators is something that I am absolutely loving. Does a killer job. That's about $560. The sPod that we're running everything on retails around $930. The Holley digital dash, the 6.86 dash, that's around 1,100 bucks, maybe 1,200 bucks, and in my opinion worth every single penny. That thing just looks phenomenal, and I have access to see anything and everything that I need to see right there from the dash. A couple other big things were the hooker headers. Those were awesome. They're a little over 500 bucks. And I spent another $400 at the exhaust shop getting mufflers and the exhaust installed. And we can't forget about the winter shifter. That's about 270 bucks. And honestly, guys, this list is just way too long. But you're here for the answer. How much did it cost? $14,000, give or take. And yes, there's a lot of ways that you could have done this and done this significantly cheaper. But realistically, probably not much cheaper. And the reason I say that is because if you're going to go through all the hassle and all the trouble to remove your factory engine, especially if it's working, and replace it with an upgrade, with an LS, with a big V8, do you really want to skimp out and do it in the cheapest way possible and lose reliability? Because I just don't fall into that camp. I want to be able to climb into my Jeep at any given time and hit the road, hit the trails, go anywhere that I need it to take me. I don't want to always have to be worried about where I'm going to end up stranded because I saved a couple bucks doing one thing or another differently. So yes, is $14,000 a lot to spend on a used engine and transmission installed into a Jeep Wrangler? Probably. But I can tell you from experience, there's not very many things that give you the same kind of feeling that I get behind the wheel of this Jeep now. So again, thank you so much to the partners like Holley and JS Alternators and even Tecton for coming through really clutch with all the tools. And thank you guys for watching. I know a lot of you guys have subscribed because of the LS Swap series. This is probably the last video of the series, but I'm sure we'll have some updates in the future. Thank you guys so much for joining me on this. This is a huge undertaking. I've never done anything like this before in my life, and the fact that this thing turns on, runs, drives down the street is pretty mind-blowing to me. So with that said, I appreciate you guys. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe if you haven't already, and I will see you guys in the next one.